Welcome, Lauren. How you doing?
Hi, Jeff. I'm all right. How are you?
Okay, it's good to see you. Thank you for popping in.
Yeah.
Um, so this is our third session together. And you're probably getting used to a little bit of the sort of setup of these sessions, but
Mm,
the first thing I want to do is just kind of do a brief check-in and find out kind of what your mood is like.
mm,
Is there anything that happened in the past week that you'd like me to know about?
hmm. Yeah. I appreciate you checking in. I think last week I feel like when I came to this session, I was in a much angrier and more active place. I think this week my mood is just lower. Like it feels like I'm tired. I'm just kind of like worn out. Like I'm not just like as, energized as usual. And the past week, I mean, I think partially like that's my mood because the past week was just such a slog, like my boss and I like had that situation last week where she assigned a bunch new work. And then this week it was just kind of like mini versions of that all week long with like different people asking me to get things done or like needing tasks, meeting the deadlines, whatever. So just like that kind of structure.
Okay. Thanks for letting me know. Last week we talked a little bit about an homework assignment
Mm.
or an action plan or whatever we called it, which was every time that you felt some sort of conflict coming on, whether with your boss or somebody else at work. We talked about maybe you're taking note of the feelings you were having in those moments, and it sounds like there have been some more minor versions of those
Mhm.
moments in the past week. Is there anything that you can share with me on that front?
Yeah, absolutely. It was really like helpful to be tracking my feelings. I find it's like not something that I like prioritize often in my day to day. And so I think that like partially just a lot of feelings of overwhelm and like not being good enough. Like really feeling like I'm inadequate or like I need to prove myself, to prove my worth. Like, there was an example where like on Tuesday, I was supposed to get one of our like smaller assignments done for the project, and the person like checked in and wanted it by end of day, and I wasn't going to be able to do it. And my feeling then was just, I was so like down on myself. And I was like, why can't I do this? Like, just strong feelings of inadequacy.
Um, okay, thank you for sharing that. So remember, one of the things that we talked about before was this concept of automatic thoughts. And it sounds like what you're describing, this sort of overwhelmed feeling, this inadequate feeling, are your automatic thoughts in these situations. Before we get into that, I'd like to ask, what do you feel is important to work on today? What's the most important thing if we only have time to cover one or two items? Is it this feeling of being overwhelmed or feeling inadequate? Is there some other thing that you'd like to talk about?
Yeah, I know. Last week, I think we brought up like my challenges with communication and conflict and my feelings of inadequacy. I think for right now, focusing on the inadequacy piece would be the most helpful. And then the conflicts in the back of my mind, maybe for later.
Okay. So can you describe a little bit more about your feelings around, like, think of one of these moments from the past week in particular. Can you
Mhm.
describe a little bit more in depth what happened and how you responded to it and what your feelings were in that moment?
Yeah, yeah, I think I would go back to this moment I was just talking about where I basically like had a small assignment due, and I had like been working on it and everything was going fine, but we had a little bit of like a hiccup with another project, so I had to like allocate some time to it. But my coworker um basically was like, "Well, I still need it by the end of the day. Like that's just what it is." And I really like pushed myself really hard to like get the other part done so I could finish it by end of day. And I like thought that I had done it like well enough that I had like sped through it, not overdone it, allocated my time appropriately, and so like would be able to finish this particular report. And I could just tell by like 4:30 that I was like feeling really stressed out, very burnt out, like could not focus, but was like really beating myself up. Like, why can't I just finish this and get it over to them? So I don't know if that answers your question,
It
but
did, it did. And so this sort of instigated a feeling that you were feeling inadequate, as you said before, that you
mhm,
couldn't get the job done. Um, let's let's talk about this. Let's examine the evidence.
mhm.
Do you have evidence? Well, we'll do both. Do you have evidence that is in favor of you actually being inadequate in some way that would say that you
Mhm.
are inadequate? What evidence do you have?
Yeah. Yeah, I think I was thinking about this too, like partially still from last week, getting laid off in my last job, still just it seems like really strong evidence to me that I'm inadequate, that I'm just like an easily removable person and that my work like isn't good enough. But I also, even as you were asking, was thinking like I found this week that I was just comparing myself to my other like teammates and coworkers a lot. And so like on like that Tuesday situation when it was like 4:30, my desk mate had gotten all of her work done and was like also under like a lot of pressure, but like, seemed fine, seemed easy breezy, was like finished 15 minutes early. And I just felt like, especially in comparison, that I was just like not enough in a way that she so easily could be.
When you say you felt like you were not enough, how did that thought or belief affect your behavior and what you did next?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like this is so frustrating that I notice that when I find myself thinking that way, like things only get harder. Like that those thoughts and feelings started to come up and I just felt seized. I like totally lost focus. And I like wanted to like leave and like take a walk or take a breather, but I felt like I couldn't. But then I was just sitting there. It's not like anything was happening because I felt so like overwhelmed. So I think I just feel really caught.
Well, let's examine the evidence from the other side. Do you have evidence that refutes this idea of inadequacy or that you're not enough or that you're not doing a good job?
Yeah, yeah, I mean, I think I really do, like, in my last quarter, we had performance evaluations, and, like, I did great, like, my bosses told me that I was, like, definitely on track, there were no problems, like, they gave me, like, things that I could work on, like, skills I could learn and grow, but they didn't give me any indication that I was, like, actually doing, like, a poor job or, like, not enough things, so that feels like an important piece of evidence.
When you had that evidence, how did that affect your behavior going forward?
Yeah, that I feel like that's still really hard for me to hold on to. Because like even my boss, for example, like will remind me of that. Like will be like, that like everything is fine. Like we did a whole like review with you and that you were like pass with flying colors. And I just find that like in the day to day, like remembering that and like believing in it feels really challenging.
I understand. I understand that. Do you, I'll put it to you, do you think there is a more positive way of looking at this situation? And if so, like, do you have any ideas for what it might be?
I guess like a more positive way of looking like at what part of the situation?
At this feeling of inadequacy, like comparing yourself to other workmates of yours and feeling like you don't measure up.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think if I'm understanding you correctly, like a part of the way that I could think more positively about it or maybe spin it a little bit is that I do feel like my boss and my team like really believe in me and like hold me to high standards and expectations because they like think that I actually like am very competent and like can do good work. Um, I do think that sometimes like that can overwhelm me too, but I feel like that's the more like bright side of it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that's incredibly valuable what you just said. And I think what we can do is figure out a way for you to pursue this positive thought that other people are putting on you,
Mhm.
pursuing it for yourself. This you mentioned that your boss has said you've passed with flying colors. There's a lot of respect for the work that you do
Mhm.
with among your colleagues. What do you think you need to do to pursue this positive thought of I am enough, I am adequate? Do you have
Mhm.
any ideas?
Yeah, I mean, personally, I feel like it is just coming here and like dedicating myself to doing this work with you because I've never been in therapy before. So I think just even like I said earlier with you, like I don't think about my emotions very much in the day to day. So I think like trying to build like a practice and a routine of like checking in with myself and taking care of myself and just kind of generally like coming to treat myself like I am enough, which I don't think I really do right now.
And how do you think you can do that? Treat yourself like you are enough.
Mm, partially, I think it's through just like basic reminders. Like when I had my performance review, I did like put a little like sticky note on my desk with like their final comments, which was like, you've done a good job. So I think just kind of like maybe building in those affirmations into the day to day. And maybe also just like letting more people in my life like know what I'm struggling with. Like I find that like leaning on like my friends or family members and being vulnerable with like how much I'm struggling is really hard for me. So I think that seems important.
Yeah, those are both really good skills to have. And the sticky notes thing, it may sound like a kind of a silly little, band-aid on a problem, but it sometimes that's enough to
Mhm.
kind of turn things around in the same way that if somebody smiles at you, you might feel more compelled to smile as opposed if they frown at you. It's just
Mhm.
sort of positivity. Um, Thank you for sharing that. As we move into a little bit toward the end of the session, I'm gonna summarize kind of what we've gone over here. Um, uh, this we identified together this feeling of sort of inadequacy at work, and that there are moments where you feel like you're not enough, that you're not doing
Mhm.
enough. You're comparing yourself to other colleagues of yours. And yet you also are seeing that there are plenty of positive strokes coming your way from your boss, from your colleagues, um, that you may feel like you need to check in on yourself and take care of yourself a little bit more, treat yourself like you are enough, and whether that's through basic reminders, the sticky notes that we talked about, affirmations, um, talking to more people in your life who are close to you because it feels good to talk about those things. Do I have that about right?
Yeah, yeah, no, I really appreciate you summarizing. That makes sense to me.
What do you feel like is your takeaway from this week? Like the most helpful thing that we talked about, or if anything has been helpful?
Yeah, no, I think my biggest takeaway is probably understanding the automatic thoughts. Like this is still a new concept for me, and I think like even coming from a place of like not really checking in on my emotions, like I think getting at what's underneath that feels like pretty novel, and I think will help me communicate more, like we said, with like other people in my life.
Absolutely. And just to reiterate, the concept of automatic thoughts is it's not it's not that they're true. It's that
Mm,
they represent, I think I said last week, they represent like what you fear about yourself, what you don't
mm,
want to be true. And that doesn't mean they're true. Everybody has automatic thoughts. They're completely normal. You're
mm,
not alone in that way. I'd like to, before we end, come up with an action plan for the next week, more homework. Uh, and that is, I want you to write a letter to yourself,
mm,
imagining you are one of your friends who you've talked to
mm,
about how you're feeling. Um, how would you, what would you write in that letter? Write it, you don't need to edit yourself. Just write whatever
mm.
makes the most sense coming from this trusted and respected friend. Does that sound like something that you could do?
That sounds like something I could do. I think I'll have to watch the not editing part, but I like the
Well,
idea.
if you have to edit, you can edit. But I would say the sort of the emotions that you're feeling first and foremost are kind of the ones that we're interested in. Okay. Quick question before we finish. How did this session go for you? Is there anything I could have done to make it better for you? Are you happy with the way these sessions are going?
No, I thought this was great. I really like appreciate what we did, and I'm like curious to explore the action plan with you. So no, I really liked it.
Terrific. Okay. Well, thank you, Lauren. I appreciate your time, and I will see you next week.
All right, that sounds good.
Bye.